Okay, item number 15.
Stage 3 drought update.
Mr. Hagmark.
Madam Mayor, council members, I was certainly hoping this would be my last presentation, but unfortunately Mother Nature doesn't seem to be working with us on this. So we'll be going over the latest on our weather forecasts, going over community conservation efforts, kind of kick off our water supply strategy going forward based on what we've seen, lake and reservoir operations, status of some capital projects, and then, of course, the latest on our water conservation program. So NOAA continues to pump out positive information about rainfall, and you can all take that with a grain of salt. Unfortunately, none of it has yielded any real rain that we can, and any substantial runoff into any of our reservoirs. This is currently the drought monitoring update as of February 16th, showing the central portion of the state still suffering from the highest level of drought condition, and doesn't appear to be any plans to improve. Now, this is despite some pretty average rainfall in Northern California, but that spigot has kind of turned off as well, which is kind of alarming. So where we stand right now, Gibraltar Red Lake has received 8.55 inches, which is 50% of normal. We should have roughly 17 inches of rain at Gibraltar in an average year. At the end of the year, we hope to have somewhere around 28 inches of rain at Gibraltar. That would be an average year of rain back there. So you can see we're substantially off from that. Lake Cachuma just under 8 inches, 61%, and then Santa Barbara at 7.63 inches. Fortunate for us, the community continues to get the conservation message, and we racked up 29% conservation in January. Holding steady is our cumulative average of 34% conservation since declaring a Stage 3 drought emergency back in May of 2015. So revisiting our water supply strategy that we are currently working under, which is a 25% conservation, and what we're going to be talking about in the next few slides is what to do about this additional supply/conservation. This equates to roughly 6,000 acre-feet of water in the next 2 years that we would need to balance our water supply strategy going forward. And so now this is on top of desal, which we are planning its arrival and operation in October. And so this is on top of this addition to our supply.
Just to go back, is that the 3125 acre-feet?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. So our water supply strategy this year, our goal is obviously to address for 2017 and 2018 the shortage that we see there. We have bought adequate supplies to get us through this year and in preparation for next year, but we're also looking to put off the decision to expand the desal facility given the expensive cost of taking that on. Again, additional cost for that. Desal expansion, what we'd be talking about here is going from 3,125 to 7,500 acre-feet. The treatment plant expansion and distribution costs, we believe now are somewhere in the $45 million range. That includes roughly $12 million in distribution improvements that would be necessary to get that much water out of the low zone of our system. The challenge is this: we'd be producing water in the bottom of our system and need to push it up. At the 3,000 acre-foot, we're able to consume that water in the low zone, so it doesn't create the problems of this expansion. But we feel like we have a pretty good cost now on what that would be, and the timing. We think it'll take about 18 months. So when we talk now about our supply strategy, we're trying to delay this a year. That means we're looking out 2 years to make sure we can have adequate water to get us through the next 2 years, at least delaying the desal expansion decision until this time next year. The tools we have in our toolbox: demand management via conservation and supply management. That'd be purchasing additional water supplies. So what we have here is a supply strategy that we are strongly considering, which is moving to a 35% conservation. It isn't much of a leap because that's basically what our community is doing now. And so with this, we have a potential shortage in 2018, which is 2 years out, of about 2,500 acre feet. And so we'd be looking to purchase water this year that would ensure that we have sufficient supplies for the next 2 years. So demand management, conservation target, moving to 35% would be one way of addressing that and certainly reducing it. Regulations, at this time, we're not seeing the need for additional conservation. We believe, unlike the rest of California, we have a community that's gotten the message and have all figured in different ways how to conserve and are helping us to meet our target. Rates, again, are another item in our toolbox that we'll be considering, and moving from 25% conservation to 35% conservation is going to yield a need to increase our rates to keep our revenues basically neutral. To basically bring in the same revenue. The schedule for this is we want to discuss these conservation targets in March, so we're kind of introducing it today, and then implement something in April and May. So the supplemental water purchases, this is, the council's very familiar with this. We've gone through this in the last 2 years and purchased water out there. Assuming the 35% conservation, we're looking for about 3,000 acre feet, which is 2,500 acre feet for 2018, and then 500 acre feet of contingency water. We believe because the community is conserving roughly 35% now, it would be good to purchase some contingency water. That would buy us some room if there's a couple month delay in the desal project for whatever reason. We have a well go down. We have some backup to that. We do have $3 million budgeted for water purchases in FY16. And this year, we're going to be looking back to North Delta for a purchase of water. You may recall last year we bought water south of the Delta, which was a very smart move. That water was secure, and the Delta was having lots of issues moving water through there. But there's a return component to that. Basically, we were renting the water, and so we now have this obligation now to return this 5,000 acre feet of water within the next 10 years. And what we have and what we're looking at now is Northern California tracking more on average rainfall. So this is kind of a busy graphic. What it is in kind of like a stock indice. It looks at 8 weather stations that the Northern California that they track and pull together, and it helps kind of judge how much runoff we're going to get. This blue line right here was precipitation based on those 8 stations, and it kind of flatlined here in February. But for all intents and purposes, been trending along average. So we feel fairly confident that we'll be able to purchase water on the market. We've actually made contact through CCWA and our water broker with Sacramento Valley Irrigation District. They have about 10,000 acre feet of water they believe will be for sale this year. Of course, moving water through the Delta, there is this terminology called carriage loss. Basically, there is a tax for moving water through the ecosystem, and that's kind of helped to offset some of the impacts. We would need to purchase roughly 4,000 acre feet of water to get that 3,000 acre feet that we're looking for. Budget-wise, we're hopeful that we can find water for cheaper, but $700 an acre foot is what we think the market is this year. We've heard $550, we've heard $600, so we're planning for $700. That puts the purchase cost for that 4,000 acre feet at $3 million roughly. Next month, we might come back and ask to move $500,000 out of the drought, move $500,000 around in the drought program into this, just to make sure we have plenty of money, because this purchase moves along pretty quick, and we have to commit by April 25th. It is a take or pay arrangement, just like before. Basically, we will have to agree to pay for this water by April 25th, and if there happens to be some issue in the Delta, an earthquake or whatever that makes it infeasible to move water through the Delta, then we lose the water. And that's the big risk associated with this. However, there will be many, many other folks in the same boat. There's a lot of water moving through the Delta. This water does, though, get delivered between July and September. So this takes me to the, I think, the high point of my discussion today, which is Kachuma. It is in pretty dismal shape, and the critical task at hand is moving the barge. We have been, since August, living off of this barge in the lake. We were hopeful El Nino would come through and put some water in the lake and at least allow that location to remain. But it doesn't appear we're going to get that, and so we need to move that barge, and it needs to move immediately. It is a critical facility to being able to move not only our state water, but our remaining carryover water that's in the lake. We have a contract from Cushman Contracting. They're the ones who are operating the barge on behalf of the Kachuma Operation and Management Board, and they have agreed to move that barge within 90 days of authorization to proceed. The budget for that is roughly $750,000, which we have included in our budget for this year to cover those costs. So this is a great graphic. I will give credit to Bill Dewey, our local photographer, who took this great photo and I think really captured the essence of the problem. This should all be a lake right here, and it is now a meadow. And this right here is the intake tower that allows us to move water through the Tecolote Tunnel. And you'll notice that it is surrounded by mud. So what we have here's the intake tower. Here's the mud now surrounding it. This is the current location of the barge, which used to actually be out in the middle of the lake. And as the lake has drawn down, it's now sitting next to the shore. When this barge was put in its current location, they actually dug out underneath it to buy us some more time at this location. But it will become critical in July. We're very concerned about the water quality at this location. You're going to get some very stagnant water sitting there.
How deep's the water right there?
It currently is sitting in 12 feet of water.
Okay.
So, and then here is the proposed barge location. And again, we did this in phases to try and head off additional expenses. To go from phase 1 to phase 2 is another 6,000 feet of pipe. This is 3,000 feet of pipe here. So that over a mile of pipe needs to be added to get to this new location, along with a new electrical service that has to be done over here. It is absolutely paramount that this get done. I mean, if this is a critical facility. We receive roughly 50% of our water through this facility, and it can't be stopped. And that's what I think has been some of the frustrations. There is too much talk going on at COMB and not enough action. We believe that authorization now is even tight. For example, that pipe it needs to be manufactured because it's kind of a special order. Pipe could easily be caught in transit. It could be delayed for whatever issues could occur, and we'd be caught in a critical position. We certainly are working on backup plans, but the easiest method to resolving this is getting this project awarded and getting this moving. Right now, it requires unanimous approval of the board. Because of the project expenditure for this entire project is over $1 million. We've spent $6 million so far. Even though this moving the barge is only $750,000, it's deemed part of a multi-million-dollar project and therefore needs all 7 members to approve it. And right now we have 1 member, basically the San Ynez District ID1, which is holding out and making claims that us moving the barge is our ability to steal their water. We have actually put things in writing. There is no legal grounds for us to use that water, and so we're kind of frustrated by the issues going on in here. Councilmember White is very familiar with this, and he may want to.
I was actually going to ask Councilmember White if you could give us your perspective as our representative to COMB and what's going on and what perhaps we could do as a council to help you in your role.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, I'm very familiar with this. And Mr. Hagmark has teed it up accurately. The COMB is run by a series of committees, which then refers their work to the board, and the operations committee, chaired by ID1, has met on this issue recently. Let's say 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. And I frankly had expected this item to be before the board yesterday. It did not end up on the board agenda, and so a special meeting has been called for March 7th. March 7th is really a drop-dead date for this for the collaborative effort, where my hope is that indeed this organization continues to be collaborative and bring forward this project. As Mr. Hagmark said, even that is pushing this to a critical place where things cannot go wrong. If they go wrong, people will just be going into extra expensive overtime and such in order to make sure this project hits a July completion date for mobilization. So it really is a test of regional management, and it's one that we've seen storm clouds come up with a challenge, for example. I mean, and this is perhaps not directly connected to the barge project, but on the city's effort to implement the pass-through agreement, another one of our many collaborative agreements on the San Ynez River that ID1 has challenged the environmental document there. And as we have seen, that's often a testament to concern about the project itself. And so we will see. We have a promise from the chair of the board that this project will be before the board on March 7th and be ready for approval. I hope he's correct. And if he's not, I certainly believe that this city and the South Coast agencies needs to be ready to act to move this project forward in whatever other workaround way that we have to do so. This is a time-critical project for water for this city and for the South Coast for the second half of this year, and of course going forward from there. And as Mr. Hagmark says, this is a good. The graphic is excellent for us to understand it. We're bringing in water from hundreds of miles away. And then the reservoir is a transfer station, as it were. The water's dumped into this lake, and water we've purchased already, and then those of us that have purchased it get to then pull it out. So that's it's not just the water in the lake that we're talking about. It's that large amount of water that we have that is ours in San Luis Reservoir, a bit to our north, that we're needing to get, that we're counting on in all the excellent work that we're seeing staff perform. That's a critical piece of this equation. So March 7th is a absolutely critical date, and I know that our staff and our legal staff is looking into this already and needs to be really ready to have Plan B and C available for us to implement should the March 7th date end up being a problem. And so far, ID1 has not been. The prospects are at least concerning at this point.
And that vote on March 7th needs to be unanimous still?
It does.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Hart?
Well, I just, that tees up the question of what happens, what is Plan B? And is there anything legally that we can do? Can we dissolve COMB and do this on our own and then ask for forgiveness after the fact? I mean, this is so critical.
Mr. Kalan?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Ms. Bjork and Mr. Casey brought this to my attention recently. I believe that the current COMB position that a unanimous vote is required is questionable. That and several other aspects of this I'm looking at would form the basis for litigation. I would come to the council immediately after the 7th with a request to allow us to initiate litigation. And what we would need to do is fairly difficult. We would be seeking what's called a mandatory injunction, meaning an injunction that doesn't stop somebody from doing something, but rather forces them to do something. So that's a difficult kind of case, but I would see no other alternative given the gravity of this problem.
And can you, as I'm understanding more how the water distribution system works, we could rearrange whatever water we have left in our wells or whatever, but it's possible. And you mentioned that with the desal plant in the distribution of desalinated water can't get to everyone in the city without additional infrastructure, right? So as people need to turn on the tap, depending on where they are in their city, where their water comes from varies. And so if we can't get any new water from Lake Cachuma, there'll be portions of the city that will really just not have access to any water at some point. Am I understanding that correctly?
There is portions of our supply that are our distribution system that require surface water, and that is why we're working. Why this is so important. Certainly, Gibraltar has a little bit of water in it and can serve a role in bridging a month or so in there. That's what we're trying to fine tune in there. But what this has, and it really is a catastrophic cascade, is Goleta does not have that. Really, Carpinteria does not have that. And so by losing the surface water supply, it kind of unravels everything. I just think it's to not be able to obviously deliver to our own customers is certainly catastrophic. But then the ripple effect, how this puts the pressure on our neighboring agencies and what remaining water they have, it further exacerbates the problem.
Okay. Mr. Hart, did you have something else?
Well, I think that it clearly underscores the critical importance of everybody using every contact they have to put pressure on the San Ynez River Water District to cooperate. We're in a crisis. We should be working together, and acting in this manner, serving selfish interests at the expense of every resident of the South Coast, is just incredulous. I think that there obviously are other leverage tools beyond just water that we can engage in. If the water district doesn't want to cooperate, we need to think in terms of other tools that could put pressure on San Ynez Valley residents to communicate to their water district representatives. This is a serious issue, and we should probably talk with our friends on the Board of Supervisors and every avenue, because this is just unconscionable. And
do you get the sense that the entire board of ID1 are having these kind of discussions at their board and then directing their representative to vote in a certain way, or is that not happening? Should there be letters going to the full board of ID1 before the March 7th meeting? Any suggestions on that? Because we might want to direct staff to go in that direction if that's helpful.
I think that suggestion has merit. I do believe that the president or chair, I'm not sure what his title is, of the district and the manager of the district are leading this effort, and that I think that the remainder of the board is not as focused or as actively involved in it. And so I think that it may be useful to bring that to bear. I want to also raise this as another example, and maybe this is another place where at least the expression of concern could be helpful. ID1 wants to purchase some of the region's remaining state water rights. And that requires the Board of Supervisors to give permission for them to do so. And these are rights which I would believe to be spread out amongst the various stakeholders, and of course Santa Barbara City being one, but all the South Coast being major customers in the state water system. ID1 wants a piece of that remaining right. And I met with Supervisor Carbajal to encourage him to go forward with that. but with the caveat that subject to there being a collaborative tone and a collaborative participation in just what Mr. Hart was talking to. These things, it's either we do so much better when we cooperate with one another than when we start fighting. And this was obviously when the chips are down, it's most galling when you see the fights increase, and that definitely is what we see here. So I think being in touch with ID1 and certainly people that we know on the board could be useful.
Well, certainly a letter from the city to ID1 and probably the members of the Board of Supervisors, and I'm sure Goleta Water District, Carpentry, and Montecito will want to also opine because they're affected by this before March 7th. I think can't hurt, and I would agree with Mr. Hart also and Mr. White on whatever avenues we have verbally to connect with other stakeholders, and at least, but certainly to put something in writing now before March 7th, just so it's crystal clear what the issues are, and in the hopes that you can get that unanimous vote that you need. Mr. Hart?
Can you let us know if there is a meeting of the board for the San Ynez River Water District before March 7th? And if so, maybe some of us should attend, and maybe we should encourage our other elected officials from the South County to attend as well and explain to the board the criticalness of this issue and our frustration at their representative on COMB not cooperating.
Yes, and I think one of the other frustrating parts is in September they sold off the water that they had in the lake, so they really have no water left in the lake. So the irony of their whole argument is really just frustrating. They sold their water they had about 1,000 acre-feet of water remaining in the lake, and they're hedging their bets that El Nino was coming, their groundwater basin was full. I don't know what their strategy, they wanted the money, but they unloaded that water and sold it to Montecito Water District. The Goleta general manager actually wanted to be here today, but he unfortunately couldn't make it. He also wanted to reiterate the same concerns. We wanted to make sure the council knew that Goleta was fully behind the critical nature of moving this barge. Just wanted to pass that along. So, and I just wanted to talk.
Go ahead, Mr. Hart.
Just one last thing. I do think it is worth saying that the last time we had a regional drought and we built the regional desal facility, there just was a much different spirit of cooperation amongst all the agencies, and we worked collaboratively to solve the problems. And this is the most extreme example of the opposite in regards to cooperation, active sabotage, from the San Ynez River District. But the other agencies aren't playing as nice this time around as was the case last time either. And we don't need to cast aspersions at our colleagues in the other districts, but this isn't the only example. This is just the most important critical example. There are other legal challenges and maneuvers that other districts are doing. It's understandable on some level because the crisis is intense and the stress is increasing. And I think some of our neighboring jurisdictions bet that El Nino was going to solve the problem this year. And as every day goes by and it doesn't rain, the stress increases. But it does underscore that we're taking the right course, and we're being collaborators at every step in this process, and we'll continue to do so. But at a certain point, our patience is going to be exhausted in that process too, and we're going to have to participate in these regional dialogues in a different way. And so, I think the message to any of our other agencies that are watching is that we've been incredibly patient and reasonable in this process, but there is a limit to our patience too.
So this slide here, I just wanted to kind of show just how much water is dependent on that barge. And this is the water this year. Basically, state water deliveries that we're expecting, both supplemental water purchases and the little bit of state water that we anticipate getting, and then the carryover water that's remaining in Kachuma, absolutely essential to get here to the barge.
So if I can't even fathom what it would mean for it not to happen, but if the March 7th vote doesn't happen, if we go our legal routes and that doesn't happen, if you can go back to that slide, at what point, I mean, obviously the other options of water we're using, and some of it's not drinkable, it's the recycled water. So when does the tap go dry, I guess, at that point? Just to put a fine line of what it is we're talking about, because it's complicated.
I think if we're talking about moving that barge in July, we're already talking major water quality issues that we're going to be plaguing us. And in easily August, we're going to be talking about severe rationing and potentially our only surface water supply then being Gibraltar that we're having to ration. And we ration the entire community, not just the areas that are dependent on surface water. We'd have to ration everybody to really get the demand down as low as we needed to get it. It would not be good.
And is it 90 days to actually move the barge and create the piping necessary? So it's not like it can just happen in August. It needs to happen 3 months prior to August.
That's correct. If everything goes smoothly, it's 90 days. But there's a lot of moving parts to that. And the interesting part about it is when they moved the barge, it is basically the system is going to be down. Right now they're contracted to only take 24 hours. They have 24 hours to basically disconnect it from where it's at, move it to its new location, get it back up and online. And 24 hours is a stretch for a lot of water particularly Goleta. We're able to kind of buffer it with Laurel, but it is going to be a nail biter. Just having that disconnected and moved, it's going to be a challenge.
So the water, you were mentioning that we'd have to decide if we want to purchase by April. We would need the barge actually to get that water to us. Mm-hmm. And if the barge doesn't start moving at that point in time, we could decide to purchase this water and not get it, right? But certainly that seems like the absolute last date. If you're looking at July, August with nothing going wrong, of actually having everything in place to move that barge, right? So that pivotal point of whether we need to purchase this extra water and what's happening with the barge need to happen simultaneously.
Well, to clarify, we have already bought the water that we want to deliver this year.
Okay.
The water that we're contemplating buying would be for 2017, 2018. And it would be delivered late this summer. So we have the water we need. We just need to get it.
We just need to get it to us. Okay. Mr. Rouse.
Well, you actually might have just answered my question, because we had budgeted for our available water to purchase, but Northern California has experienced at least normal, if not superior to normal snowpacks and rain. So are there other sources that are out there above and beyond what we've planned to purchase? And then once again, we'd have to look at where we get the money for that.
Yeah, at this point, we feel if we can get that water in Northern California, that buys us the 2 years that we need to delay the desal decision. So yeah.
Mr. Dominguez?
I had a question regarding the unanimous vote. The member who voted no last time, is that an executive director or director, or is that actually a board member?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, he is a board member. He's the chair of the ID1 board. Mm-hmm.
And is that the board that we need to find out whether they meet before March 7th?
Correct. Great. Go ahead. Keep going. Yeah, no, that's very, very serious information, and I think it's important for people to understand what's going on and help us in whatever the way they can to resolve this problem. So. And
it is frustrating. I think we started this discussion back in November about moving the barge, and again, it was delay from ID1. Oh, it'll rain. You'll be fine. Don't worry. So it's not that we just all of a sudden woke up to this. We've been pushing this issue now for many months, and based on the discussion we had on Monday, where they're asking for absolutes before they're going to allow this to be moved, I feel that we're just not headed the right direction right now with them.
Okay, Mr. White.
And we've had one vote that I participated in. I came in the was it the last week of August is when I took over for Mr. Francisco on that board. And but we had one vote where ID1 exercised the veto power that Mr. Calon alluded to, which at least held at that particular meeting. So they've exercised that power once, which is to require unanimity for any project that costs $1 million or more. And I believe it goes back a goodly long ways to a time when $1 million was a whole lot more money, whole lot more value than it is today.
So just to add to some of the frustrations, as I mentioned, they don't really have any water left in the lake. They've basically sold it off. Well, they actually don't share in any of the cost of moving this barge either. None of the costs associated with this barge will be borne by ID1. It's all South Coast members who will be paying for this, yet they seem to have a veto power in moving forward. So that takes us to the status of Gibraltar, which remains at 665 acre-feet. And this lovely water here would be our backup if we are unable to, if the project gets delayed by a couple weeks. I don't know that this would provide water much further out than that, but again, does not help our neighbors with the surface water issue. Drought Response Capital, recycled water facility. We had a kind of a setback last week. We had a fire at the facility in one of the chemical tanks, and it was pretty scary. Unfortunately, no one was injured, and staff working closely with the contractor were able to get the facility back up and operating in a temporary mode the very next day, which was impressive. But we do have to move quickly on this because basically where the fire occurred was in this acid tank, and the acid tank is used to clean the filters. And these filters need to be cleaned regularly or they will foul and basically they will be useless and you'll have to throw them away. And so we've got this temporary makeshift thing working, and but we're watching it closely because it's not ideal for the filters. And so we need to get this permanent fix back in here so we don't do any long-term damage to the membranes that are in there. They're very sensitive. Desal, work continues on site. If there's a positive to the great weather we've been having, they've been making great progress. Basically finishing up underground conduits and piping. The treatment units that are being manufactured off-site are on schedule to be delivered in May. The contaminated soil removal is ongoing, and the upside to it is the contamination we've been seeing has actually been better than the initial testing, and so we've been able to take it to a low hazard site rather to the more expensive sites. So that is helping out. We are right now wrapping up negotiations on accelerating the project to try and make up for the roughly 4 weeks that we lost due to the contaminated soils issue. And we believe we've got a plan now that will put us back on schedule for delivery in October. So things seem to be going in the right direction there. The desal project, just one of the other elements, we have the subsurface intake study on Wednesday, January 27th. It went very well. And I will be coming back in March to present a summary to the council of the discussion. The potable reuse element of that study is also ongoing, and we're hoping to have a tentative meeting in July to present the findings of that. And then the desal grant funding, we continue to pursue Prop 1 funding. There is $50 million out there for desal-specific projects. And right now we are arguing with the staff over the eligibility dates. Their go-to eligibility date is whenever they award the grant. And they've been, haven't had the staffing, so they haven't been working on this. And under their current schedule, they wouldn't be awarding any grants until 2017, which would make our project ineligible. So we are pushing hard on them to consider more appropriate grant funding eligibility dates like the governor's declaration or the passage of Prop 1. And hopefully we've made some pretty strong legal arguments and we'll convince them to change their position.
Ms. Maria?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Regarding the feasibility studies, I have questions triggered by a letter from Channelkeeper dated February 10th. And in it, Ms. Redmond asks why you're using 10,000 acre feet as the measure as you go forward looking at feasibility, when I think earlier in the presentation you said that we're working with 3,125 acre feet as the amount of water that the desal plant will be producing, right, until next year. Then we'll decide why go with the higher 10,000 acre feet. The concern is that you won't find these other subsurface intake or potable reuse feasible because there's so much water involved. Why not use the 3,000 mark?
So, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, this is a point, and it was brought up during the work plan. And at this point, we have a facility that's permitted for 10,000 acre feet, and we want to secure that water source. There are many things happening in our water supply, including Kachuma, in which we believe the safe yield from that reservoir could change dramatically after this drought. And I think at this point, we want to leave all of our options open. And what we've done with that study is look at what capacity we could get from each and every one of those various options for subsurface intakes. And what we want to do is carry that along and ultimately feed it into the long-term water supply plan, which will probably be an 18 months, a 2-year public process in which we go through our supplies looking for input. And at that point, we'll know, I think, have a much better idea about what we're looking for from desal, not only now, but in the future. And at that point, then I think we can go on to study an appropriate intake for that capacity. But at this point, I don't think we want to give up any of the capacity we have because we may very well need it. And so I think at this point, we're keeping all of our options on the table. And
well,
I
what Ms. Redmond, and excuse me for interrupting you, but what Ms. Redmond is saying is, why don't you study 3,000, 5,000, 7,500, and 10,000? Why not study all the levels as part of this technical advisory panel process?
So the issue with studying all those different options is we're talking millions of dollars. It's not a $100,000 study. And so what we want to do is be more surgical about what we study. And so specifically, once we know what we need from desal, then we can go about studying it, and we'll be more we'll know exactly which options will actually give us the supply that we need. Because I think just going out there, and we could study all the different options, but when you look at them, many of them aren't any this community, I think, socially or economically would want, because they have significant infrastructure on the beach that we would have to take on.
Right, but didn't I hear you say that for the next 12 months we're working with the 3,125 acre feet figure?
That's correct.
Okay, so and this panel is meeting right in these next few months.
The panel has already met on this and provided.
There's not another
we had
meeting.
Our public.
Okay.
You know, on the subsurface, we are done with that scope of work. So the next, but it's coming back to council. I'm going to present a summary of that discussion that we had on January 27th.
Okay, I think I'm not entirely satisfied with your answer, but I'll wait for the next opportunity to inquire. Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question about this slide. The round one funding, $50 million. Is that a replacement for that? We have now a $50 million loan for round one of our desal plant, right?
So we have a $55 million loan, yes, and this is the maximum project grant on this is $5 million. There is $50 million total available in this round one, and I think the next round could be another $40 million or so. But again, it has to be the project. They have to, when your project was completed, determines how much you're eligible for, and so that's what we're in a discussion with them now.
Okay, and I'm not understanding whether I was thinking that we were talking about the next increment of desal, so that's where I was going with this. Is that what the $50 million grant would be for? That would be $50 million that would be basically substituting for a bunch of the loan.
We're trying to get $5 million of this 50 to offset our current costs that we have in this, the $55 million. That's what we're trying to get. Okay. And if we do an expansion, I'd be I'd be hoping that that would be a new project and we could pursue additional grant funding for that.
Okay, thank you.
That 50 million is statewide.
I understand.
Yeah, okay. Okay, keep going.
So our discussions with Montecito continue, but there is no significant progress. I wish I had more to share with you at this point. Water main replacement, I just wanted to brief the council, given the number of main breaks we've had, that we are reinstating our main replacement work and hoping to construct the first 5 top priority locations by this fall, following up with a much larger project next spring. The main replacement program, we want to bring that back for a policy discussion in May and June with council and just go over, what options are available to reduce the frequency of breaks that we're having. As I've mentioned many times, we have a system that has basically reached the end of its useful life. And, we're starting to see that show its head, and it could continue. And it doesn't take much. That's one of the frustrating things for staff. It takes, small changes in pressure in the system, small changes in temperature, and that's all it takes to take this 80, 90, 100-year-old pipe and push it over the edge. We also are going to reinstate our main flushing program. This is a program that we used to do on an annual basis, but have postponed it for the last 3 years because it does, I think I calculated we dump about 50 acre-feet of water when we do this. Again, it's an important part of the health of your system. It's kind of like exercising. You want to get out there and run some significant flows through the system and flush out anything that might have settled out of the water. There isn't really a health issue that I'm worried about here, but just general status, water quality, maybe taste. There are some technologies that we're exploring right now that allows you to recover that wasted water. It's not cheap, but we're exploring that and hope we'll start implementing something here soon. And then I just keep bringing this graphic back. This is the water main break history. And what we have over here on the right is the 12-month break history. And right now, over the last 12 months, we've had 111 breaks. Staff has been extremely busy over the last 4 or 5 months responding to the breaks. And, fortunately, we budgeted for some overtime. So far, we got that covered, but we do have additional paving costs that we're trying to absorb. The trend roughly is flat right now, but we're hoping that you can see there's kind of a seasonality to this. We hope it will come down, but certainly I think we're seeing the signs of our aging infrastructure here.
Mr. Hart?
So if you decide to pursue the water main flushing strategy, will that come back to council before you do that, or is that something you just do on your own?
I'm here every month, and I plan on certainly informing the council. It depends on the approach. We are talking about an idea of flushing where you don't have to dump the water, and I'm not sure exactly how we'll contract for that. It might be a sole source, and in that case, we might need to come back to the council.
I guess the reason I ask is that, obviously that is a challenging public relations process if you're going to have water spewing out of water or fire hydrants, I assume.
Yeah.
So just, that we've talked before about symbolism versus reality. That's a hard one to get around, even if it is just symbolic.
It is. And
I would encourage you to spend a little bit extra money to recover the water. I don't know that we could explain this to people, and we're asking them to conserve more water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the flushing typically occurs at night, but hands down, I completely agree with you. It doesn't matter if it's...
The YouTube video
I was going to say YouTube is
posted
24/7, 365, so you're right.
Yes. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to Ms. Ward to walk you through the conservation program.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Madeline Ward. I'm the Water Conservation Coordinator, and today I wanted to touch on rain gardens. I wanted to highlight some of the benefits of rain gardens because we were hoping that we'll have more rain in our future. So just to give you a quick comparison, a 1-inch rain event on a 1,000 square foot roof will generate 600 gallons of water. Most rain barrels hold about 50 gallons, so what we recommend is that people hold the rainwater in their soil and that they store it in their soil. So a rain garden is a garden that has planted depressions or basins within the landscape that are designed to collect rainwater and stormwater runoff from downspouts and hard surfaces such as roofs, driveways, pathways, etc. And this allows the water to slow, sink, and spread rather than running down into the storm drain. So rain gardens, which are also called sponge gardens, they're a beautiful waterwise addition to your landscape. They can reduce the need for potable irrigation, reduce pollutants that run off into creeks and oceans, and reduce garden maintenance and help recharge the groundwater. Rain gardens use the principles of slow, spread, and sink. It's important to break up hard surfaces such as pathways to create a permeable surface across the landscape, to create infiltration basins or dry creek beds to distribute the water over a broad surface to slow it down and allow absorption, to redirect downspouts to enter the basin rather than run off on the hardscape, and to add mulch to retain moisture and help break up the soil to make it spongy, and of course to add beautiful waterwise plants. To help community members better understand what encompasses a rain garden and also what one might look like, we have 3 demonstration gardens that I'll highlight today. The first is the rain garden at Spencer Adams Park, which is at 1216 De La Vina Street. This used to be a lawn, and it was upgraded from a lawn to a native rain garden in a series of hands-on workshops that were open to the public. We had a basics class, a sheet mulching workshop, a planting and irrigation workshop, and a workshop for professionals. The dry creek bed and the downspout were expertly installed by the city's park staff, and this whole garden was partially funded by a California Coastal Commission grant that was facilitated by the Surfrider Foundation as part of their Ocean Friendly Garden program. The second garden is the rainwater demonstration garden at the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors office, which is at 1415 Chapala Street. This was also converted from a lawn to a waterwise rain garden to showcase the curb appeal of sustainable landscaping. 3 different downspouts were diverted into the infiltration basins. And in 2015, from January to July of that year, this garden existed without any potable water irrigation. They turned on the irrigation system for a few months in August before it started raining again. The prior lawn was watered 3 times a week. Our most recent conversion is the rainwater demonstration garden at the City College Shot Center, which is at 310 West Padre Street. This also used to be a lawn that was removed to create a dry creek bed with a downspout that was redirected into the dry creek bed. To help residents and landscape professionals install these rain gardens, the city has a partnership with a local nonprofit group called Sweetwater Collaborative to provide city-sponsored hands-on workshops and graywater and rainwater 101 classes. I just wanted to highlight some upcoming city-sponsored events. We have a hands-on rain garden workshop this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then in March, we have a rainwater harvesting 101 class, which is Thursday, March 24th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m., and a graywater 101 class Wednesday, March 30th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And more information on those events can be found at our website.
Great. And this morning we had our ribbon cutting for our 8th permeable paver project at the facilities maintenance parking lot. And when it did rain, whenever that was, a couple of weeks ago, I went over there. It's pretty amazing. This is when there was flooding down in that area, and the permeable pavers just sucked that water right in, recharged the ground basin, and the streets were really flooded. So talk about, not letting all that water go to waste and put to good use. And plus, it looks beautiful and grant funded, so not using general fund money to pay for infrastructure. And this is the 8th one. I know there's others in the works, so that's all part of the big process. I said, it'd be nice if you had it rain on this particular ribbon cutting, because that would have, we didn't pour any water for the optic reason, like we did at Oak Park, but that's also part of the big project. So thank you for that. I Phil Walker had a speaker slip, but I don't see him here. I don't see any other speaker slips, so it's to the council if there's any other final comments on this item. Mr. Dominguez?
I just had a few questions just for clarification. The rain totals for water year 16, the 50% of normal, this is on the 6th slide. Mr. Hogmark, is that 50% of the whole water year's normal or 50% as of 2/19/16?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, that's as of the date on there.
So that's 50% of what we would normally have up till February?
That's
or
correct.
It's 50% of what we would have in a normal year?
Normal for that date.
So we've had half as much water this year than we would normally have,
That's correct.
even with the rains we've had?
Yep.
Okay. So we've actually, in terms of the bigger picture, this is a worse year than normal, despite El Nino. Okay.
We've seen this pretty consistently, unfortunately, for the last few years, where we're so far off from normal. It's pretty frightening. But yeah, average rainfall for Gibraltar for a year is about 28 inches. Average for this time of year is about 17 inches there. So typically it's a very wet place. But the El Nino storms that we have gotten have not been have not thought very fondly of Gibraltar. We've actually gotten just about as much rain here in Santa Barbara, which is odd.
I was hoping I was reading that wrong, but thank you for correcting me. And then along those same lines, on the current supply strategy slide, where you show the different sources of water and the 30, 25, 25%, and that's the savings, the extraordinary conservation, the top white color?
Yes, that's a conservation that we are currently asking our community for, and they're exceeding that, but that's our current supply strategy that we've adopted basically last year when we adopted the Stage 3 drought regulations. And it absolutely critical to us. We show it because it is a supply. It is offsetting, but I think it's important to understand in an average year we might use 14,000 acre feet and how we exactly come up with our current supply strategy.
And the 25% that's the reduction from year 2013?
Yes.
Okay. So at some point, if we keep having these trends, we might want to call this the new normal instead of that we're saving water, just to prepare the population for the fact that, hey, we're not going to ever go back to the day where we're using 25% more than we have been the last 3 years.
Yes, we anticipate there will be a new normal when this drought is over, and it will be something less than what we were using before this drought. That's exactly what we found after the 87 to 91 drought. We never got back to that. At that time, we were using 16,000 acre feet a year, and we only got back to 14,000 following that drought.
And then the last question I had was the potential water purchase. Where would we store that? Was that going to be in Lake Cachuma, the $700 or 700 million acre feet, and with the delivery? Where would that end up going?
We would store that water in San Luis Reservoir, which is located off the I-5, basically Central California, where we currently have water. That is magic water there. It doesn't evaporate. And so we store it there and we have it delivered. And the way it works, we instantaneously pass it through Cachuma. We do not try to store any of our state water in Cachuma if we don't have to.
Does that go through the barge?
It goes through the barge. Absolutely critical.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to take a second to appreciate our water staff. They've been handed just a series of white knucklers and I'm sure overtimers. Now we have a fire in the reclaim plant, but just you look at every single piece of our system has been, and then the main break spiking. So each one of these things is a legacy that you've inherited and that we've inherited and that you're being asked to deal with, and you're doing it with aplomb and professionalism. And Ms. Dyer isn't here either, and she's a key player in all of this and needs to be called out for doing excellent work as well. So thank each and every one of you for your great work.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to double on that. And it's been crisis mode, but it's been an ongoing crisis mode for about 2 years now. And each time we think we've kind of hit a peak of a crisis and we're going to catch a break, we haven't. And so we've had to keep doubling down, and the staff has been nothing but professional and steadfast in working through it. So I thank you for those comments.
Thank you. And with that, I think there's no motion necessary for this item, so thank you very much. Okay, we have one more item before we